With all your concern, I'm just trying to record the session. Today topic is identity and access management. So we are, as we know, the APM as such that we work, the modules that we work on a big IP is all about access management. So today we'll cover what is identity and what is access management. We'll see a different perspective of IAM. I wanted to bring to you whatever I learned from this domain throughout my career. I have just put it down in a few slides so that you'll also get to know about it. So starting with identity access management, we will just go through a few fundamentals, the basic concepts initially, and then we'll dig into um, each of the component of IA. Though I don't get into very deep into each of the component, but I'll give you a glimpse of what it is and what it does. Because each module itself will call for a different session altogether. So what is the problem statement that we are trying to see discuss today is the how are the identities are managed across the enterprise and what exactly is access control. And the objective of this discussion that we have today is to discuss and understand how identities life cycle is managed within an enterprise and also understand different access controls and what are there and what are the different categories of access controls that we have and how are we going to use or how does the enterprise use them in the real world. The basic agenda will look like this. We'll discuss about identity management. We'll discuss about single and multi-factor authentication. We'll also look into what is session management, federated identity management. We'll discuss a little bit of credential management systems, and then we'll jump on to authorization mechanisms. And the last one I like to discuss is the zero trust access control that we're trying to implement in Big IP. And we'll end with a Q&A and with IQ note. So before we actually jump into any of the topics in the network security or the information security is all about preventing a loss occurring in these three areas: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three triads, and all the security measures that we do and in this security domain is actually to prevent loss and implement the access controls across these three triads. So hence these three categories of IT loss is so integral and it is very part of the IT security. So I don't have to reiterate what is confidentiality, what is integrity, and what is availability. So I think most of you already know it. Confidentiality is all about hiding the information from when you actually pass from one person to the other person, the source to the destination. Integrity is all about maintaining the integrity of the content of the data. No changes it while it is being transmitted from the source to the destination. Availability is all about providing access to the right owner, access to the data to the right owner when required. So this is all about availability. So in this security, IT security is all about preventing the losses occurring against these three triads and implement the access controls around it. So what exactly is an access control? So access control is all about identify and authenticate the users and any other subjects. Actually, it may not be always users. It can be other processes or bots or such attempting to access resources. Determine whether the access is authorized, and after once you identify and determine whether the access is authorized, and you grant or restrict the access based on the subject's identity. And at the end, you also monitor and record all the actions that have been performed by the authenticated users or the subjects. So these are the basic things, the basic 4 steps of any access control. Any access control that you implement This is all about, you know, identify the user, and then determine whether he has got access or not. And then once you determine whether the access is already provided, then based on the policy, you either grant or restrict the user based on his identity. Check, in fact, you check for any exceptions. Based, in the second step, whether you once you determine the access is authorized, in the third step, what you do is you check for any exceptions. As a role, if somebody has got access, but as an identity, if something is restricted to him, you have to check for it, and then based on that you grant or restrict the access, and then at last you monitor and record for all the forensic purpose. You know, once somebody has done something, you record that particular action, so that in the future, if somebody wants to go back and check, see what changes have been made by whom, this will stand as truth, source of truth. So what are the different types of access controls that we have? So there are basically, broadly, we have only three types of access controls: preventive, and detective, and corrective. But there are other categories people will look at and with the different perspective. But access control is all about, you know, just to provide a proper access to the right owner. So the control types that are implemented in the enterprise are either preventive, or you detect the threat, and also you correct the process. So preventive is all about attempts to stop the unwanted or unauthorized activity from occurring. So this can be a typical firewall, or a fence, or a compound wall, or, you know, a high security wall around the enterprise, around the office, or around the subject. So detective is all about discovering or detecting the unwanted unauthorized activity. So first one is to just prevent, and the second one is to detect if there's something is happening. It's like a live monitoring of the application. It can be any SIM, or it can be any other process which actually continuously monitors the process. And the third one being corrective. It is like once the damage has happened, somebody has done it, and you detect, and then you try to correct the process. So it is this like modifies the environment of the process to return the systems to the normal state. So once that the intrusion has happened and somebody did some changes, and you want to correct it automatically. So this corrective access control types, they automatically detect, once the automated detection happens, it will try to, you know, make the system come back to the normal state. It can be like, you know, rebooting the system, restarting the process, something like that. So these are the three access controls that broadly preventive, detective, and corrective. So once now that we have understood what exactly is access control, and we have also seen what is the CIA triads in security. Now we'll quickly jump into identity management. So what exactly is identity management? So we'll see the basic definition of identity is it is a set of qualities and beliefs that make a person or a subject. In fact, it's a group of it's a group of persons, or a person, or it can be any subject as such. It can be a process, it can be a bot, it can be a system, logically uh, differentiating that particular subject from the others. So that set of qualities and beliefs is it's said to be a identity. So how do you define somebody is individually, has a unique identity? It is because of the traits that the subject has, or the qualities the person has, or the traits that the particular process or system has. So based on that set of qualities and beliefs, that set is actually making us independent, different from the rest of the group. So that set of qualities or attributes combined together is called an identity. So logically in a system, it is typically a user ID. That should, so we will make sure that that is unique across the system. So that defines or maps to a single person. And whenever he tries to log in, so he is recognized, that particular unique individual is recognized with that unique ID, that is user ID. So coming to the some basic security principles around the identities, their identification and verification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. So where all you prove your identity and why they are used. So what if there is an application and everybody comes and uses it for their own purpose, and you will never ever know who has actually performed those actions on the system. So to identify or to differentiate a set of operations done by one individual to the other, you do identification or verification. So it is a process of the subject claiming or professing an identity. It's that is about the identification. But the basic difference between verification and identification is, verification you compare one sample against a single store template. Like, it's like one to one. You enter the user ID, then automatically the system goes back and checks whether you are already existing in the system or not. Identification is all about, it searches with the entire database or entire set of results or entire stored credentials, the identities, and identifies that it is you. It is basically a biometric search. Once a typical attendance system, you find it in any office. The employees come and they just put their finger on the biometric sensor. The sensor takes the biometric and compares against all the identities against the stored biometrics in the system, and will identify you that it is this guy was come and at this point in time, and records that particular time. So after so identification is all about one-to-one, and one-to-many, and verification is one-to-one. Authentication is to verify the identity, and by comparing one or more factors against the stored valid identities or accounts, user accounts. Authorization is a function of specifying access and rights privileges to the resources. So authentication is to identify the subject, and authorization is a function of actually specifying the access rights or privileges to the resources. Accountability, of course, is actually possibility of tracing the action. Somebody has done an action on a particular subject, so subject has done some actions on the system, then you want to go back and see in time who has done it, and what systems he has done it, what process he has done it, what actions he has performed, so that they can establish the responsibility for those actions and omissions. So again, before actually we jump into the actual identity and access management, so these are the set of things that basic fundamentals that we're going through. So as part of that, I want you to understand the basic difference between an LDAP and Active Directory and a database. So way back when there was no concept of identity and access management as such, everything was dealt with only a username and password and ACLs. So ACLs in the file system. So LDAP was one such protocol that was designed for applications to query user information. And the basic difference between an LDAP protocol and searching in a database is like, LDAP is read very fast and write very slow. So it is basically used at telecom and other domains where the reading has to be very fast, and writing can be pretty slow because it's only write once and read many times. So that is where the protocol has come, and that was later adopted and implemented in a much larger scale by Microsoft, and with much more features. That's called Active Directory. And typically a database is a storage. So it just stores the data in the columns and in a structured way that the user defines. So basically, LDAP or Active Directory is a directory structure. Each entry in the directory has attributes that can be accessed through some distinguishing name. It's called DN. That is used while querying the directory for any subject. As I told you, adding and updating and reading the data from LDAP is optimized for fast searching and fast reading, wherein when you enter in the old ISDN type of telecom networks where we just dial the number and the telecom directory just lookups for the particular number from the directory and then dials in for you. And also LDAP provides a little bit of security around just it's not that it is fast in search and reading. It also binds to the service through an authentication. So this authentication can be a simple username password. Now that the LDAP and Active Directory has grown up more advanced, we could now able to authenticate the client against LDAP or AD through a client certificate or a much advanced protocol called Kerberos. So that's about database, LDAP, and Active Directory. So this is a typical, very old way of the applications or identities spread across in an enterprise. So as a user, I might access the applications through multiple form factors. Though when this type of network is designed, probably it was pretty old, and that time tabs and other form factors are very less. So I had different user IDs connecting to different applications. So we have 4 different applications, and each application has a different username and password for me, with a different role. So if you consider our own network, we have Jira, we have Federate, we have Confluence, we have what do you call Workday, we have ServiceNow, we have multiple applications, and it can be like each application is having a different username and password for the same user. As you could see, I'm handling multiple user IDs. So way back before to AD, that is 2000 or 1999. There was no concept of single sign-on and stuff like that. So people used to write all the user IDs and passwords for the different applications that they are trying to access, especially in the banking and other industries where they had to deal with multiple applications together. So the industry or the enterprise itself will have multiple applications within the organization, and each application is to deal with a different set of data. So user as playing multiple roles will have different user IDs across the different applications. So the aggregation of these identities and consolidation of these identities was always a big mess, and especially when the user is laterally moving from one department to the other department or moving out of the organization. So that has become a more headache for the organization. So I'll tell you why the IDM and IAM has come into place. So because to solve all these problems, especially this application one is actually relying on a Active Directory for all their username and passwords of identity management, and application 2 is also relying on ADs for some part and LDAP in some part, and also application 3 is again dependent on LDAP. Application 4 is dependent on a plain DB. So there's a wide variety of technologies, wide variety of directories, wide variety of identities spread across different directories and different applications. So that overhead has become more and more in enterprises over the time. So just to manage, so this is one problem that has come over the time in every organization. So we'll see how it was resolved and solved. So before I jump into actually how the multiple user accounts have been solved the problem of having multiple accounts in different applications for a single user has been solved. Before to that, we even have to understand what do you mean by credential. Way back when the organizations were facing this problem of multiple identities in multiple applications, they typically had only username and passwords that time as their authentication mechanism or identity. So it is only through that unique user ID in the system that we will be able to identify the particular user. So but with the same user having different identity, it has become difficult, and forgetting the passwords was a routine thing. And for a human to actually remember multiple passwords for different applications have become more headache and ad hoc. So to set that problem, people have been relying on the other ways of authenticating the user apart from typical username and password. So the other credentials through which the user is identified apart from a username and just a secret or a password is the different set of credentials. So these credentials are that can be now people are able to authenticate themselves with the biometrics. Within biometrics, you have fingerprint, iris, you have RFID cards, you have smart cards, your contacts and contactless cards. You have a mobility using your mobile as a token to authenticate yourself. And of course, your behavioral things and your trades will also, you'll be able to add external fact and an extra factor for safely logging in or authenticating yourself apart from the user ID. So this way of segregating the credentials is everybody has got their own perspective of putting the credentials or categorizing the credentials. So this is my own perspective. When I started learning about credentials in my early career, so I had a chance working on different types of credentials, and over the time it has its own problems, storing the biometrics, and passwords can be changed, but biometrics once compromised, it's for a once in a lifetime. You can't change your fingerprint. Of course, you can change your DNA through if you do a stem cell therapy or change your DNA, but most of the biometrics you can't change until unless you cut the part out. It's like the iris. Somebody donates the eyes until unless you can't change it. But mostly, for most part of the time, of biometrics are once in a lifetime thing. So you can't change just like passwords, or you lose your smart card, you go to the government or the agency and request them for a new card, they'll give you a new card. But the fingers and biometrics are their fingerprints and the iris, you can't change them every now and then. So you have to be extra careful, and you have to be extra careful while storing and also provisioning the biometrics into the system. So yeah, you would have seen Aadhaar as one of the best example, and that is the most robust system, biometric system that has ever built in the world, with such a huge database. So as it involved biometrics, so that's how the uniqueness is maintained in the system. So even if somebody has already a unique ID existing and applies for the second one, the system rejects the request as the biometrics are already stored. So yeah, that's how the uniqueness is maintained using biometrics. And of course, the unique ID itself, the number itself is unique to everybody, every citizen in the country. So it's a second factor. Biometrics can't be used as a single factor all alone. So what I want to say is, unlike passwords, it's not a one-to-one match. Biometrics is all about give you 80% match, 70% match, 60% match. It's all about matching the distance from the already enrolled template. So even if you submit the same fingerprint again and again, the match is not 100% every time. So it is not a string match, one-to-one match. It's always it gives you 70 to 80% match, 90% match of the existing template. So it is the system's decision whether it can authenticate you based on the distance or based on the percentage of match that has happened. The typical military based authentication, they always rely on 80 to 70% to match. Of course, it also depends on the algorithm that you are trying to use and the standard that you are using. Yeah, so that's about the biometrics and smart cards. So biometrics itself is such a huge topic. I'll before I carry out myself into deeper into biometrics. But anybody interested, let me know. It's a separate topic to discuss for 30 or 40 minutes. So coming to single and multi-factor authentication. So now that we have understood the problem of multiple identities of a user in different systems and different domains, and the second problem is the credentials. Now that you're trying to solve a problem of not remembering multiple passwords, but the storage of credentials itself, a very wide variety of credentials, again is a problem. So the other problem people try to solve was, why don't we club these two? Why don't we authenticate the user with the password first, and then with another set of credentials like biometrics or any other set of credentials, so that it will be much more secure, and you can authenticate the user and identify the user in a more secure way. So before we understand how many factors that we have, the multi-factor authentication is all about these three: what you know, what you have, and what you are. What you know is all about the secure strings, your passwords, your passcodes, that you know, for that particular application, and for that particular domain or particular application that you are trying to provide or authenticate yourself, or requesting the access for. So what you have is all about what you carry. It can be a token, it can be a hardware token, in fact. It can be a smart card, it can be a RFID card, it can be a mobile, in fact, that generates a TOTP, or just a mobile number through an SMS, out of the band authentication. So that is mapped to you, to your identity. So what you have is what you carry, what you have physically, that's tangible. What you know is just in your mind, and then it's just known to you until unless you put it out on a piece of paper. It is just known to you in your mind. So what you know is passwords and passphrases, secure strings or secret strings, whatever you call. What you have is the hardware, tangible items that you carry to identify yourself. And what you are is the biometrics. Is how you are built, what you are actually. So it is basically biometrics, and within biometrics you have multiple different types of biometrics. So you have fingerprint, you have iris, and you have the walking style. You would have seen some Hollywood fancy movies where user get authenticated. They are asked to walk through a ramp or a specific place where his walking style and other traits, his voice, including voice, are captured and authenticated. So basically, what you know, what you are, and what you have are the three traits, or three factors of authentication. Even if you authenticate somebody with two different passwords, one password the after other, it is not considered as multi-factor. Rather, it is considered as multi-password or multiple authentication, but it is not a true multi-factor authentication. So for it to be a true multi-factor, it has to be a combination of these three, and cannot be more than three. So I think I'm pretty clear now. So I mean, here I just tried to put a small depiction where you are trying to access through multiple browsers, different types of browsers and different operating systems, through different very wide variety of credential types. A biometric smart card, a digital certificate stored in a smart card, or a digital certificate that you are passing through a file system, or a typical password that you have. You have more now. I think you should be thinking about push notification and also TOTP, HOTP. There are multiple things, but I could capture only few. This just for the information, but you can expand this visualization with other factors that you have. In the next slide, we'll see what are the other things. So you are trying to authenticate through an end agent where it tries to understand or pass this credential back to the system for authentication. So it can be an endpoint agent, or it can be any reverse proxy or a gateway. Sorry, it can be a reverse proxy or a gateway and a typical web application. You're trying to log in and identity and access management that you have, or user directory that you're trying to authenticate yourself, or operating system, a typical authenticates operating system, Windows, Mac, and Linux, where you authenticate with username and password. So the most modern authentication mechanisms that we have is the behavioral intelligence. You can authenticate yourself with the biometrics. You can authenticate out of the band, like push notifications and SMS based authentications. And the last one, I mean, it's not the last one. You still have many more, but these are the widely adopted or has standards. The most different systems are, there are highly secured environments. They come up with more intuitive or more creative ways of authenticating the user more securely. More than creativity, it should be called as more secure. So behavioral intelligence is all about how do you answer a question. It's about you're given a pattern, to solve, or a puzzle to solve on the fly. So you always solve the puzzle in the same way. Or there was a recent patent by somebody authenticating over Google Maps. So if given a point across a town, you have to reach your house in a particular way. So you always go through particular route, even though you have multiple routes of to reaching out to your home. You might pick one single route. So that's how you remember. So it is one way of another factor for authentication. So you have biometrics, you have push notification, grid card. So and also you have one major stuff that I wanted to bring up here is authentication these days in the modern era is not just about presenting the credentials. It is not just about presenting the credentials. Like the recent acquisition by FI and Shape Securities is all about risk score. It's about it looks for the time based and location based, and sometimes it is tied to system parameters, and it is also tied to the navigation of the application. I have seen a organization that actually builds mobile apps, and it has 60 plus patents only on the behavior intelligence. So it actually imbibes into the application. Their SDK just imbibes into the application, and it tries to fetch some knowledge on the way you navigate the application. You do the transactions, whether you are left-handed or you're right-handed, or you navigate through to a particular section in the application through a menu. So it is always through that. If you bypass any of your normal trait or the way that you normally do the transaction, it detects an anomaly in the transaction, and it will try to throw a extra level of authentication to you. So interesting stuff. But yeah, there are organizations which are working more aggressively towards it. So application navigation is also becoming one of the major trait here to continuously authenticate. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up here is the continuous authentication. So unlike other applications or typical old applications where you authenticate once, create a session, and hold the user for as long as he wants to log out. The modern applications have become more intelligent now, so they continuously monitor, and any change in your trait or any change in your access to the application, it will try to push or enforce you to authenticate again, and continuous authentication policy is enforced. It need not be to every application, but at least to the highly secure application, you can still enforce this type of access controls. I think I'm clear. If you have any questions, you can raise them. So other important thing that I wanted to bring up before we jump into the actual part of the IAM and access management is the session management. So how typically a session is handled in an application or an enterprise. And before to that, I want you to go through what exactly is a session. A session is a group of interactions with an application. Yeah, Rakesh.
Vinay, continuous authentication. So, is zero trust access an example of continuous authentication, or
no? Continuous authentication is subset of zero trust authentication. Zero trust authentication is a model, so that has a wide variety of things. It has continuous authentication. It has the principle of least privilege. It has continuous verification. It has multiple things. So continuous authentication can be a subset of the zero trust.
Okay.
But you need, apart from continuous authentication, you need a principle of least privileges and access controls. Also, that is more important than authentication, because zero trust is all about is majorly about access, not about authentication. Authentication comes after the enforcement fails. After the authorization fails, then you try to enforce the authentication. Okay, you understood the point? In zero trust, what actually you maintain is very least privilege to the user. So once the user tries to jump into other security application, after logging into one application, he is trying to jump into other application, which is more secure than the one he has already authenticated. So what the application does is it will detect, if not the application, at least the middle layer will detect that somebody called Rakesh is already authenticated to one application, which is least secure, and he is trying to access a more secure application now. Then ZTNA will detect that, and it will try to enforce extra layer of authentication.
Yes. Okay, so the detection is important, is what you're saying.
Exactly. It's access that is more important. Of course, it can be same password again, but this enforcement agent will try to enforce another authentication. It will say, okay, Rakesh, now that you're trying to access more secure application, I request you to authenticate again. And that re-authentication can be username password only, or it can be a step of authentication with multi-factor, like your push notification or password or SMS or anything.
Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you. So session is a group of interactions with any application that you have, which actually identifies the identity and gives access to the data the user is actually authorized to. So it is actually a temporary contract between two parties, the server and the client. So this information interchange happens once only through this session. So it is like, typically you go to any bank. I don't know whether you had a privilege in going to a teller and withdrawing the cash in gold old days. So when we actually submit a check or withdrawal form, we were given a token, and we were asked to wait. The token is announced, token number. So we used to present the token back to the teller, and teller used to tender the cash. So it is like, the one who has actually carried that token is more important than the owner of the transaction. So anybody who carries the token will be given the cash. The whole security of maintaining the token with you, or securing the token with yourself, is the responsibility is yours. It is your own responsibility to secure the token. If I get the token and that token number is shouted out, and I can present the token and get the cash. So in a similar way, a session, once that get established between two parties, so it's a secure contract. for a temporary period of time. So what happens is, if you as an individual trying to access an application authenticated, and you got a session with you, and if I present the session, the server just feels that it is you. I am trying to impersonate you and present the session. So there are a lot of vulnerabilities, hacks around this session. So the protecting the session is a very vital in whole of the information security, or the security domain as such. So most of the OWASP top 10 and SANS, they are around the broken authentication and the sessions. So you can find more information about that, but I'm just giving you a glimpse how and why it is very important for you to secure the session. It's not just securing the session itself, it is about the generation itself. The session should not be predictable. There was a recent hack, it's not recent hack, a couple of years ago, a Torchlight application was actually trying to read all your OTPs from the bank. And it is the interesting part of that app was it was able to, given a set of OTPs, it was able to predict the next OTP. So yeah, that is where the OTPs got compromised, and yeah, the OTP algorithm itself was they had to change it, change the way the OTPs are generated. So different story, but the sessions are all about that. It's not just about generating and storing it securely, but it is about the generation also. So once the session is established at a certain point in time, after the prefix time is over, that token is no more valid. So you have to re-authenticate, regenerate, and pass the same token again back to the user. Usually this session is a GUID or UUID, a random generated string at the server side, that will be shared to the client in a different ways. We have different technologies to share that session, in the form of cookies, in the form of session variables, in the form of form attributes, in the form of there are multiple ways of sharing the session, so that next time when you come for a request to the server, you need not present your identity again. You just present the token. Server understands that it is you who has been asking for this data. It will check for authorization. If it is authorized, it will throw the data back to you. So yeah, so this is about the sessions. So a typical session, again, it's a depiction, it's a perspective. It can have, it is not a picture perfect session, but this is the way the sessions are usually stored in a modern applications. You have a global session where you have session ID as an assurance level or risk level to that identity, and you have a physical access session, you have a desktop or logical access session, you have a web session. Web session is also a logical session, but it's more into web applications, and this logical session is all about a desktop or a workstation login. So once in the morning when user comes in, or enters the physical premises of the enterprise, he tries to swipe in his card, punch his card for opening the doors, barriers, whatever, and then the physical session is established. The user has got into the premises. So once he gets into the premises, then he logs into the system, and then a session is again created, established, and then he tries to access a web application. Then there's a resource name and with a session. So these modern applications, they have, as you have now the attributes and collecting the data of the user behavior of trying to log in to a web application through a physical door, and then to a workstation and to a web application. So there are the data centers, especially one of the use cases that I found recently was there are policies that are defined around these three attributes. So before you try to access this workstation, you should be having a active physical session in the same domain. So only when you have access through a particular door and that you have come in, then you are allowed to make active session or log into the workstation or any of the rack servers that you have in the data center. So if you don't have this session is not established. So that way they maintain the security. So somebody can't remotely connect and log into the server and make some changes there. So we have pros and cons to it, but to maintain the high secure environment, these are some of the things that the enterprise does. So coming back to all these problems that you have heard, why these multiple identities, why don't we consolidate, and people started solving all these problems. Multi-factors authentication, people started solving the problem with authorization, people started solving the problem with the consolidation of identities. And at last, there was a system that was built to address all these problems. So that system is called as identity and access management. So it's all about user management. It's all about directory services. It's all about authorization services. It's about authentication services. So a typical IAM, IAM system should actually should be providing all these services, authentication services, it is now mandatory to have SSO, multi-factor authentication, session and token management. It should be having authorization services based on roles, rules, attributes, privileges. It should be serving a directory services, identity as a store, directory federation, metadata synchronization, so virtual directory. It should be doing the user management services, which it was developed for. Provisioning, deprovisioning, self-service, delegation. So if you slightly look at it, the IAM has over the time has grown. Earlier it was all monolithic code which was actually serving all these services in a single framework or a single service. Now each service has grown up into its own domain. So you find products only for single sign-on now. You find products or frameworks or middlewares which only does the multi-factor authentication, nothing more, nothing less. There are products which does only session management now. There are products which does only provisioning and deprovisioning now. There are products which does only delegation. So there are role-based and role-based access. Of course, that's access management stuff altogether. But yeah, it is not boiled down to individual domains as of now. But the reporting and others, this analytics and governance, all these things have come up as individually. Now people are facing problems while integrating all these components individually now, because there's a single sign-on product, C identity, CA SiteMinder, or trying to integrate with a multi-factor Okta framework, or trying to access some access management, Tivoli or Oracle Access Manager, something like that, and trying to that being integrated with Oracle directory services, that getting integrated with some deprovisioning and provisioning service. So you see there are multiple products that have evolved over the time, serving dedicatedly serving each service within IAM. So as such, it is difficult to find one single whole IAM product, but each one has got their own strength. So I think you got a glimpse of why how IAM has evolved now. So I just put that in a space where you can understand. So it's all monolithic at this level. Then got into identity manager and access manager. And access manager now, later some point in time, they got single sign-on, single log off, single sign out. Some of the features in the access manager, single sign-on feature itself. And then the access manager got into single sign-on, identity manager, independent products. And sometime later, we have PIM, PAM, and multi-factor authentication frameworks coming up, plugging in. And yeah, that's how the multi-factor authentication platform has become independent offering by different organizations. So this is the overall evolution. What I understood from my start of my career. So it can be different. Everybody has got their own perspective. This is my perspective. So don't search for this, you don't get it anywhere. So it can be different in a different perspective or individual. So now that we understood that the different applications have different user IDs, so instead of the last slide we have seen same user having multiple identities, accessing different applications. Now that with IAM in space, IAM in, or identity provider in place, I just have to remember only one identity with one role called user. So the service provider and identity provider will take care of provisioning my identity into different applications. You see, still user IDs are different, and my roles are different. In one of the application, my role is admin. In one application, I'm a PO. In another application, I'm a programmer. In another application, I'm an end user. So you have different roles. You play different roles for different applications, and the identity is the user IDs are different, but you are still be able to access them all using a common credential. So that's the beauty. Some people call it a single sign-on. And the access management is done at the service provider level. Identity management is done at the IDP level. So coming back to the single sign-on stuff, so why now that you understood what the importance of single sign-on and how difficult it is for somebody to remember multiple identities to access multiple applications. So back in old days. So now that we have the single sign-on in place, it is the way to authenticate the user with a single set of credentials and to multiple applications. Which are actually independent to each other. So you have one single user who's trying to access multiple applications. So it is the same sign-on or single sign-on. Earlier days, it was, some people used to call it as same sign-on. That's okay. And you have single sign-off and a single logout as another extension to the SSO extension feature. You log out in one of the application, and you can define the behavior of getting logged off in other applications too. And there is more complexity that is added recently that I have seen in one of the Australian-based organization which is offering that. So you have 3 different applications here set at different security levels. So if these 2 applications are at the same security level, and this being a more higher security level, if you sign out in one of the applications, say application 2, so you will be signed out from the application 3, but not from application 1. It is like, you can define the policy, something like that. You can sign off the user from the all the applications which are higher security level, and you don't have to sign off from the applications which has a lower security, application security. So that's an interesting thing that has recently come up. Are we quick check on time? We just have 1 minute.
We have consumed almost an hour.
Oh yeah, I'm still left with 15 more slides. Can we continue? I mean, I can stop it here.
Maybe we can continue this in the next session. Let's give time to digest this.
Yeah, I'm just stopping.
I mean, that's my